I always thought family was supposed to be your safety net. When I got into that car wreck, my first thought was about my kids until I sent the text, and nobody responded. When I finally called, my mother answered, with that bright, practiced cheerfulness. "It's just terrible timing. Celia," she said, "we have a cruise deposit due." I laughed. A quiet, hollow sound that barely made it past my lips. But inside, the last thread of hope snapped. They wanted a perfect life, but only if I was the one paying for it. Silently and without complaint. So I stayed quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. Instead, I started making a plan they could never talk their way out of. 2 weeks later, while they were still sending me links to their cruise itinerary, my evidence went public. Because the case I was building wasn't just about family drama. It was criminal. And when my father saw the police report with his daughter's name on it, he collapsed. My name is Celia, and I grew up in a family that ran on transactions disguised as love. Big family dinners, expensive birthday gifts, holiday cards, where everyone's smile was just a little too wide. It all looked perfect from a distance. But up close, I always felt like the family ATM, the one who kept the beautiful machine running. My parents, particularly my mother, were obsessed with keeping up appearances. My younger sister, Chloe, was their masterpiece, bubbly, beautiful, and a budding social media influencer. I was the responsible one, the one with the stable job and the good credit score. My mother used to say I was her rock, but I could always hear the unspoken part, a rock you stand on to get a better view. Still, I loved them. Every time they needed something, every crisis, I was the first call. I showed up with money, with solutions, with whatever they needed. I thought that's what you did for family. But love in our house was conditional. It depended on my utility, my compliance, my silence. I learned to smile through the one-sided requests, to pretend it was fine when they only called when they needed a loan, even when I felt more like a resource than a daughter. When the car spun on that patch of wet asphalt, my first thought wasn't about the shattering glass or the searing pain in my side. It was about my kids. Leo, who is 10, and Maya, who is 7. Who would pick them up from school? My text to the family chat was simple: car crash. I need someone to get the kids. I stared at the phone from the emergency room bed, my hands shaking too much to type anything else. Hours went by. The little read receipts appeared under my message from my mother, my father, and Chloe, but their phones and their lives remained silent. Later that night, Chloe's Instagram story lit up. It was a video of 2 champagne flutes clinking. The caption, a cheerful, "Treat yourself Tuesday." She was at a spa. My mother had even loved the post. The sheer, breathtaking indifference of it settled in my bones like a permanent winter. The coldness wasn't just anger. It was a kind of clarity. I wasn't family. I was a foundation. And they had just proven they would let the whole house collapse if the foundation had a crack. I finally gave up and called my cousin, Anya. She picked up on the first ring. "Celia, what's wrong?" I explained, my voice cracking. She didn't even hesitate. "I'm leaving work now. I'll get them. Don't you worry about a thing." She picked them up, took them for dinner, and her husband, Ben, met them at my house to pack their bags for the night. They didn't ask questions or wait for instructions. They just showed up. That's what a real safety net feels like. 2 weeks later, still hobbling around my house on crutches. My body, a patchwork of bruises and stitches. My mother called. She didn't ask about the accident. She didn't ask about the kids. She launched into a breathless story about a once-in-a-lifetime cruise deal. "The deposit is $3,200, she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "And it's non-refundable. So we have to book it by Friday." I listened to her go on and on about balcony suites and port excursions, while my leg throbbed with a dull persiste pas. She finally paused, waiting for me to ask for her bank details like I always did. In that silence, I said one word. "No?" The line went quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, The kind that happens when an entire reality gets upended. What do you mean? No, she finally stammered, her voice full of genuine confusion, as if I'd just started speaking a foreign language. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't list my grievances. I just said, I can't help you. And I ended the call. As I put my phone down on the counter, I felt a deep, satisfying click inside my chest, like a heavy door being locked for good. The backlash started within an hour. It began with Chloe. First, she texted me a link to a designer handbag that cost more than my mortgage payment. A few minutes later, another text. Mom said you were being weird about the cruise. Everything okay? The fake concern was so transparent, it was almost comical. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She was taking my temperature, checking to see if the ATM was back online. I left her on red. My new boundary was a wall of silence. Then came my father. He sent a long, rambling text message. That was a masterpiece of manipulation. It was all about the importance of family, helping family, how they had always been there for me, a blatant lie, and how my mother was heartbroken that I was suddenly punishing them for no reason. He painted me as the cruel, ungrateful daughter, the one who had suddenly and inexplicably turned her back on her loving parents. I read the whole thing and felt nothing, just a dull, hollow space where my filial duty used to be. The grand finale came that evening. Chloe posted a black and white quote on her Instagram story, the kind people use to signal a dramatic konflikt. It read, "It hurts when you realize you were watering a dead plant all along." The complete and utter lack of self-awareness was staggering. They saw times themselves, times as the neglected plant. They had no idea they were the rot that had killed it in the first place. They truly believed they were the victims of my sudden, inexplicable cruelty. I thought their campaign of guilt trips and passive-aggressive social media posts was the worst of it. I thought it would stay at that level of pathetic emotional blackmail. I was wrong. The real escalation, the move that showed me exactly who they were, came a week later. It was a call from Mr. Seven Davison, the principal at Leo's school. His voice was kind but firm, the tone people use when they have to deliver terrible news. "Celia," he started, "I'm calling because an anonymous report was made to the child welfare hotline this morning." My heart didn't just stop. It felt like it fell right through the floor. The world went fuzzy at the edges. It continued, explaining the complaint. There were two specific, monstrous allegations. First, that I was leaving my children unsupervised for long periods in a home filled with hazards. Second, that I had developed a substance abuse problem and was misusing the prescription pain medication I'd been given after the accident. The blood drained from my face in a cold, sickening rush. I knew, with an instant and absolute certainty, who had made that call. Only my parents and Chloe knew the specific name of my prescription. I had mentioned it once on the phone to my mother when she'd called not to check on me. But to complain about a bill, this was their leverage. This was their response to the word no. They weren't just asking for cruise money anymore. They were threatening to take my children away to get it. They had crossed a line from which there was no coming back. The family I had spent my life trying to please was gone. In their place stood three strangers who were willing to burn my life to the ground for a vacation. That night, after the social worker had left a kind woman who could clearly see the allegations were baseless, I didn't sit in fear. I sat in a cold, clarifying rage. The malicious hotline call wasn't just an attack, it was a catalyst. It pushed me past grief and into a methodical, relentless pursuit of facts. I spent the next 6 hours glued to my laptop, launching a full financial audit of my life. I pulled my credit reports. I downloaded years of bank statements. I started untangling the web of financial connections I had foolishly allowed to form between me and my family. And that's when I found it. A credit card, opened 6 months ago, with a major national bank I never used. The account was in my name, and, listed as an authorized user, was my sister, Chloe. The outstanding balance was over $12,000. My breath hitched. I clicked open the statement, and my vision narrowed until the glowing screen was the only thing in the world. I scrolled through months of charges, a detailed receipt of my sister's lies. There were charges for boutique hotels in the city, $500 dinners at Michelin star restaurants, and a constant, bleeding stream of purchases from designer stores. Every gifted dress in her Instagram posts, every perfectly staged brunch, every impulsive weekend getaway, it was all funded by fraud. By me? A chilling clarity washed over me. Sharp and absolute. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This wasn't about hurt feelings or a cruise deposit. This was identity theft. This was a felony. And they had just handed me a mountain of evidence, complete with dates, locations, and transaction IDs. They had given me the weapon I would use to dismantle their world. The time for emotional reactions was over. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My movements became deliberate. Precise. A general preparing for battle. First, I called a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud and identity theft. She told me exactly what I needed to do. Second, I went to the police station the next morning and filed a detailed report, providing them with the credit card statements and Chloe's name. Third, I contacted all 3 credit bureaus and put a permanent freeze on my credit. Then, I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and I began to write. I crafted a post for my private Facebook page, the one connected to our entire extended family. My parents' church friends, old neighbors, everyone who saw them as pillars of the community. I was strategic. I was surgical. I didn't use a single name. I didn't need to. I simply laid out the facts. An emotionless, undeniable timeline of events. I started with the date and time of the car crash, and my simple plea for help in the family chat. I followed it with the spa day, the frantic demand for cruise money, and the subsequent guilt-tripping texts. Then, I detailed the anonymous, malicious call to my son's school, carefully explaining how the accuser used private medical information. I finished with the discovery of the fraudulent credit card opened in my name, and the $12,000 of debt racked up by an unnamed close family member. And then, I attached the proof. I posted the screenshots. Side by side, my disparity. Time-stamped text message next to Chloe's smiling champagne, boomerang from the spa. A redacted copy of the call log from the school principal showing the time the call came in. A redacted copy of the credit card statement, with thousands of dollars in charges for designer clothes and luxury hotels circled in red. I hit post. It wasn't a spark. It was a detonation. The post obliterated the carefully manicured garden of my family's public image in a single, fiery blast. Within an hour, the comments and private messages started pouring in. It was a cascade of revelations. A cousin messaged me, admitting that Chloe had borrowed $2,000 from him for a rental deposit 6 months ago and never paid him back. A former family friend commented on the post, questioning a suspicious GoFundMe my parents had run 2 years prior for emergency plumbing repairs that, strangely, never seemed to happen. The facade didn't just crack. It disintegrated in real time as everyone connected the dots and saw the undeniable pattern of manipulation and deceit. The fallout was swift and brutal. Chloe's micro-influencer brand partners, the wellness tea companies and boutique clothing lines, dropped her within 48 hours. The comments on her old posts turned vicious. My parents quietly deleted their old, questionable GoFundMe page. But it was too late. The damage was done. The social shrapnel from my post was devastating to their reputation. My mother called me, her voice a mess of sobs and fury. Not to apologize, to demand. "You have to take that post down, you're ruining the family's name," she shrieked. "There's nothing left to ruin," I said calmly, and hung up the phone. A few days later, my lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter to Chloe regarding the identity theft, along with a notice that a police investigation was officially underway. Her social media accounts went dark. The phone calls and text messages demanding money stopped completely. The silence was beautiful. Within 3 months, the world they had built on my income and my credit collapsed. Without my financial support to cover their shortfalls, my parents' mortgage went into default, and they lost their house to the bank. Chloe, with no income and a looming criminal investigation, had to move back in with them, into a cramped, 2-bedroom rental apartment across town. My world, in contrast, became small and peaceful. It revolved around my children, my work, and my chosen family, Anya and Ben. We started a tradition of Sunday night dinners at my place, our laughter filling the rooms where anxiety and obligation used to live. One evening, my daughter Maya looked up from her drawing, smiled, and said, "I like how our house is calm now." That one word, calm, was my victory. It was worth more than any apology I never received. More than any money I never got back. With the thousands of dollars I was no longer hemorrhaging to support their lifestyle, I opened college funds for Leo and Maya. I started my first real investment account. My future, for the first time, was entirely my own. 6 months after the post, a single letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, on a folded piece of paper, was one sentence scrawled in my mother's familiar handwriting. "You destroyed this family." I felt no anger, no sadness, and not a shred of guilt. I walked to the kitchen, slid the note into my shredder, and listened to the quiet, satisfying whine as it was torn into unrecognizable pieces. I didn't destroy a family. I just stopped being the foundation for a rotten building. And when it finally collapsed under the weight of its own decay, I was finally free to build something new. The greatest lesson I learned is that the people who belong in your life will show up when you need them. New questions asked. And it's more than okay to lock the door on everyone else. They thought my story was over. But it was just the beginning. Subscribe to see what happened next.